First of all, let me welcome Stuart Chalk. We are very pleased to have you here and to give us the opportunity to learn more about what IUPAC is doing on the IUPAC Gold Book and the updates, and how we can contribute to the IUPAC in this very important project. So before giving the floor, a virtual floor to Stuart, let me briefly introduce Stuart. So Stuart is a professor of chemical informatics in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Florida in the US. He has a PhD from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst in US. His research is focused mainly on chemical informatics, semantic chemistry, and also scientific data models. And we also compile some information. So he's a titular member of the IUPAC Committee on Publications and Chemical Data Standards. He's also a member of the CODATA Digital Representation of Units of Measure Task Group, member of the CIPM Digital SI Initiative Expert Group, Technical Advisory Board member of QDT.org. It is a non-profit organization dealing with semantics as well, and of course he's the IUPAC Gold Book webmaster, and today we'll be talking this webinar about what IUPAC is doing. So I think all of you know that part of the mission of IUPAC as well is provide a common language for chemistry, and today Stuart will be talking about the history, updates, and semantics of IUPAC, in particular about the Gold Book, as I mentioned, and the updates that are needed, and how we all can contribute to this IUPAC effort for the benefit of everyone. So without any further delay, Stuart, please, I'm very pleased to hand over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, let me share my screen. Yeah, let's get this full screen here. Come on, why are you not? All right. Okay, thanks for the introduction. I'm just trying to organize my stuff. In particular, there we go. I'm showing the chat. So if there are any questions through the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat. And if I can, I will try and answer them as I'm going through. But if I don't get to them while I'm going through the slides, obviously I'll be happy to answer them at the end. Thank you for coming, wherever you may be, and at whatever time zone it is. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about a set of projects that have turned out to be a very, very important part of my contribution to IUPAC, and something that I am very passionate about. And so what I'm going to do is basically give you an introduction to myself in terms of how I got into all of this stuff and how actually I got into IUPAC, and then talk about what we're doing with the Gold Book, this compendium of chemical terminology. So my outline you can see here. So like I said, I'm going to talk about how I got into this. Then I'm going to introduce you, if you don't know already, about these things called IUPAC Recommendations. And then we're going to go through kind of the evolution of the Gold Book, which is the colloquial name for the IUPAC Compendium of Chemical Terminology. There are, as you can see, a number of different phases. We're currently in phase 3, as listed on here. And at the end, I'm going to highlight how I think members of the IYCN can get involved in this activity from a number of different perspectives, because as you will see, what we're working on right now is a major activity, and will have very significant implications for IUPAC and chemistry in general, because it may be computer-based, but it is very much in line with IUPAC's mission, which is a common language for chemistry. And of course, in the past, that has been directed towards a language for humans. And as you will see in this project, and what I believe to be the evolution of this project, we're going to be talking about basically the same thing, but for machines. how are computers going to nominally be told or given information to be able to identify different chemical concepts. And this is a very important topic right now, as there are general topics of machine learning and artificial intelligence. A lot of those activities are already being built on the idea of computers having a semantic representation of information, of knowledge. So how did I get into IUPAC? Well, as you saw in the introduction, I'm a professor of cheminformatics, and I've been at the University of North Florida for 26 years. So I've taught a lot of chemistry, and all I knew up until, let's say, maybe 2014 about IUPAC was what everybody else knows, which is, naming conventions for primarily organic compounds. It turned out that after that time frame, I very quickly became part of IUPAC, and here's how. So, as was mentioned, I'm a chemical informatics professor now, but I'm actually educated as an analytical chemist. And I bring this up because it turns out that as much as I was interested in analytical chemistry, at my university, being a primarily undergraduate university, so we don't have students at the master's level and we don't have students at the graduate level, I found it very hard to actually get research funding for the analytical chemistry that I was doing. Thankfully, at the same time, I was also very interested in computers and databases. And in fact, within 2 years of starting here at UNF, I had created a database. At that point, it was a database of literature about my research area called flow injection analysis. And I put that up on the web. This was in 1998, with very basic, as it would be now, web technology, and got a lot of interest and published a paper on it and felt really good about it, and wanted to continue and do more with that. And it turns out that that paper actually eventually led me to become part of an NSF, a US NSF grant, for the formation of this thing called the Analytical Sciences Digital Library, which is still available online. You can see the URL there, and I'm going to share my slides as well, obviously, as a video, so you'll be able to go to these links. And that research had me being the technical person behind the scenes. So I was the one that put together the website. I managed the web server, I managed the database, and put up the content on the web pages. And that turned out to be a really excellent introduction for me to modern web design and how to put information up on a website in an efficient fashion. And so fast forward to 2015, and through a variety of different mechanisms, I became aware of I had been using the old Gold Book website. And one of my colleagues pointed out to me that there were some pages missing on the website. And so I quickly did some research and checked on the pages. And because I had been doing some more scripting in a language called PHP, I was able to work out that there were about 2,000 pages that were actually missing from at that time, the current Gold Book website. And so I pretty much immediately in the October of that year wrote a few scripts using the website called the Wayback Machine, which is literally a website that takes snapshots of websites and stores them and allows you to kind of go back in time and look at the pages as they were, obviously in previous years, previous decades, if possible. And they had a mechanism by which the scripts that I was using was able to go grab copies of the pages from before they had been lost from this website. And so within about 2 weeks from finding out that the pages were missing, I was given access by IUPAC to be able to go in and update the website and return the missing pages so that the website was complete again. Of course, that then had me in a lot of discussions with those at IUPAC, and very quickly we decided that there was a really important need to have some to generate a project to be able to make sure that the Gold Book website was maintained. It actually had been put up in 2006 and hadn't been maintained for probably about 5 or 6 years at that point. And so I wrote a project to be able to do that. And that project involved not touching the content of the website, which are, as you will see, definitions of chemical concepts, but to update the infrastructure, how the website was put together, and to create a more modern website using current ways in which websites are put together. And I'll show you what the difference is coming up here. Once I had gotten into that project, there was a lot of interest in, and there still is a lot of interest in, moving IUPAC more to the digital side of chemistry, and trying to take advantage of web technologies and databases to be able to not only present chemical structures, but also chemical data, and as we're going to talk about, to communicate concepts in chemistry. And so in 2018, I became a titular member of CPCDS, which is the Committee on Publications and Cheminformatics Data Standards. That was originally a publications only committee, but they changed the name to include the Cheminformatics Data Standards because there is a clear need to have activities in this area. And bringing that forward to today, we are currently, IUPAC is in a mode of trying to create the digital IUPAC. What that means is not only renovating the Gold Book website and updating the content, but also trying to get an inventory of all of the assets that we have that can be made digital. So anything that has data in it, but also a number of other activities around providing services and tools for chemists to be able to easily access data and work with chemical information. So stay tuned for that, because there's a lot of activity going on in this area right now. So in 2019, I was at the IUPAC General Assembly and presented the renovation of the Gold Book website. At that point, we then initiated a second project, which is to update the content of the Gold Book website. Currently, the website has about 7,000 defined terms in chemistry, and based off of all of the sources of these concepts, I envision that there's likely to be somewhere on the order of 15,000 concepts in chemistry on the website once we've done the update. So the definitions that I'm talking about come out of these official documents from IUPAC called IUPAC Recommendations. IUPAC Recommendations do not have to be papers that describe the definitions of new terms in chemistry, but they do have to do something significant in terms of promoting the communication of chemistry to the global community. So if a group, project wants to write either updates to terms or write new terms, they apply to IUPAC for a project. When the project is approved, the group meets, and then they start developing their terms, and then they submit the paper for review, and that goes through the Interdivisional Committee on Terminology, Nomenclature, and Symbols, or ICTNS, for a rigorous evaluation of have the definitions of terms been written in accordance to the guidelines that are present. And then they are published in IUPAC's journal, Pure and Applied Chemistry, as you can see here. This is just a picture of current ones that have been published. An example of how a definition looks in more recent publications, obviously at the beginning when IUPAC started writing definitions of concepts, they didn't quite look like this, although they actually have remained relatively constant in terms of their, at least their content. The format may have changed slightly, but the idea is to obviously put up a specific term, so in this case, alpha effect, and then define it. And then there is a structure to provide notes that may be needed to clarify the definition in certain specific situations. References to papers that have been the source of development of this particular definition, and then other related terms in chemistry to this particular term that's given here. If there are synonyms, those are identified, and anything in italics, like rate coefficients here, is nominally a reference to another term that has also been defined in this particular recommendation, whichever recommendation it is. And this one, again, is a more recent one, just published a few months ago, sorry, on the updated glossary of terms in physical organic chemistry, which now has over 1,200 defined concepts in chemistry in it. So publication of these recommendations with terminology in them has happened, as I said, over the last, let's say, 40 years. And in the 80s, there was an effort to try and take terms from recommendations and put them in a book to create a compendium. And that, of course, is what we now know as the Gold Book, the IUPAC Compendium of Chemical Terminology. And so the Gold Book was originally published as a book, 2 separate editions. And the content was not all definitions that were at that time published in IUPAC Recommendations. It was an editorialized version and had, as I said, close to 7,000 different terms on it, which in of itself, as you can imagine, trying to compile a book that has not only 7,000 different defined concepts in chemistry in it, but from probably hundreds of sources is no mean activity in of itself. And so the IUPAC Compendium of Chemical Terminology was a physical book until 2006, and it was colloquially named the Gold Book because it was Dr. Victor Gold who actually was the first editor of the Gold Book. Sadly, he passed away before the first book was actually published, and it had to be finished by others. But it was his vision that created the Gold Book, it's really, I think, a testament to his legacy that we are continuing the activity and actually trying to expand it, because he was trying to highlight all of the work that had been done by the volunteers in IUPAC to develop these recommendations and obviously the terminology defined within. And we're trying to do the same thing. Obviously, the activity that's gone on in the last 40 years with reference to the recommendations is a very significant amount of work, all done by volunteers. And so to be able to recognize it and to actually reuse it in a digital sense is a really important and appropriate activity. So in 2006, there was an IUPAC project to put it online. That is actually the website that I mentioned when I said that the pages in 2015, some of them had gone away. This was a major activity, and at the time, 2006, it was very cutting edge. It was state of the art in terms of web technology, and also the fact that the authors recognized that it was important to identify each of the individual terms with a DOI. So probably many of you know digital object identifiers because they are associated with research papers. And so in this context, DOIs are not associated with research papers. They are associated with the individual records of the recommendation, sorry, of the definitions in the Gold Book. And this is obviously something that we're going to continue. And one of the big activities, or one of the big decisions we have to make is exactly how do we go through the process of minting new DOIs, especially in the situation where now we're likely to have multiple versions of the same term. How do we do that? Do we just give completely different DOIs? Do we try and kind of create some kind of hybrid where it kind of looks like it's from the original DOI, we have to make that decision. So that's an interesting thing we have to think about. This is what the Gold Book website looked like at that point. And like I said, it was very advanced. In fact, it had pop-up structures. It had interactive linked images, so you could kind of navigate to different places. And it also had, not shown here, but it also had something called the Goldify function, which was where some code could be run to identify terms or concepts in chemistry that was in the Gold Book, and those could be automatically pulled out and identified as clickable links within the text on this site. And although the Goldify function has gone away in the version we have now, that's actually something we're definitely thinking about for the future. We just have to be really careful about how we implement that, because clearly there are some terms in chemistry that are actually very general words that are used, which it would not be appropriate to assign a meaning in chemistry when it's actually more of a general term. So we have to be careful about how we implement that. So this is an example of the page, or an example of one of those interactive maps. So you can see how the links go at different levels, and obviously they were very complicated. And I kind of show this information like this because, in a sense, one of the big issues that I had in developing the new version of the website was the starting material that I had to work with. This was not in a database, and I will mention what it is in a second here, but it was not in a database, not a kind of how we would do it now. So I had to get creative in terms of how I was going to construct the new version, because I had to pull the data out of the pages that were available on the existing website. And then this is one of the pages that was actually resurrected in that activity that I mentioned, to be able to put the pages back together. And I have on here the web link that you can go back to if you're interested to see this page on the web, on the Wayback Machine, because again, they keep multiple copies that were taken at different time points, and you can go back and actually look at the site almost historically if they have taken a lot of snapshots. So talking about the first website, here's what I was talking about in terms of the content. Over 100,000 files in one single folder, which if you've ever dealt with folders of large number of files, you'll realize is not so fun to deal with. All of the pages were HTML, and thankfully they were what's called XHTML, which is an XML version of that, or extensible markup language version. There were 30,000 image files, 30,000 math ML files, and 30,000 XML files that were basically used to create the site. And as I said, there are about 2,000 pages were missing. I apologize, I have a typo on here on the slide, I just noticed. But there were 2,000 pages missing, which of course, like I said, I resurrected. So I fixed and migrated the site. And this is information about the current website. So the technology we use behind the scenes is an Apache web server. As I mentioned before, PHP programming language. I use a MySQL database, which is a relational database. And then to make the website look good, I use something called Bootstrap, which is a free cascading style sheets framework, actually provided by Twitter. And it makes it easy to be able to make the look and feel of the website consistent. As you can imagine, there are lots of equations and symbols and diagrams and chemical structures. So there's some other technology that I use to be able to do those kinds of things. LaTeX is a particularly big thing for the symbols and equations. And in fact, at this moment, most of the chemical structures are actually just images that I got from the original site. And as we go through the update to add more terms, I'll be changing that to make it a bit easier to administrate, because again, having a lot of images is not necessarily the best thing. What I had to do, and this is kind of talking about what was necessary to be able to make the new site, was I had to scrape the data out of the existing pages. So that basically means taking code, running that code by loading in the HTML or XHTML content of the web pages, and basically looking through the page to find where the data was. And so that's what I did. And it took a year and a half to really even get all the data out. I wasn't working on it full time, of course, but it took a long time. And then once I had all the data out, then I could put the data back together again. And then we had some QC that was obviously important to do before it was released. So now the current website is actually built what's called dynamically, meaning when you request a page, there's a query sent to the web server. It pulls data from the database. That data is then populated into a web page, and the web page is put back in your browser. And that's good because it means we can update the content if we notice typos and stuff like that relatively easily, rather than having to go in and manually edit HTML pages, which of course it just isn't the way things are done typically these days. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay, and we've also added some new features. The current website works on all devices. It has an advanced search functionality. It has what's called an API, which is where you can have a computer go to the website and get data. And I'll show you that in a second. You can download the whole vocabulary of terms. And we now use GitHub, which is a website for code management, to not only keep the code behind the website, but also keep copies of the actual data that's in the system. So we have a much nicer interface and can do what's called agile development, which means we can keep it really up to date in terms of look and feel. Again, the content at this point has not really been updated. That's the current activity, which I'll get to in a second here. And then the API, this is a very busy page to show off kind of like the formal way the API is represented. But basically what the REST API does is it provides a very strict format URL string to be able to go and get specific content from the website. And that's what's needed by different scripting languages to be able to go grab the information. You can do this as a human. I want to show you an example of this, but predominantly this is obviously provided for people to be able to use a computer to be able to go get the data. So where the page for absorbance used to look like this, it now looks like this, where obviously the content is still in a sense the same, but obviously the look and feel is different. And the presentation of it, again, can be updated relatively quickly if necessary, because there's one set of code that puts together every single page of a particular definition. And so we're also able to provide information about which division this particular definition came from. There's a text output if you're interested. There's a PDF version output if you're interested. You can see some history information, although that is still actually the older history. But we do have a plan in the new update to be able to not only update the definitions to more current definitions, but also then be in a particular term, be able to link back to previous definitions of that term that have been published in the recommendations, which is actually very important, especially from legal reasons where there are lawsuits and people want to use the definitions of chemical concepts to be able to prove their argument either way. I mentioned the API. Next page shows you what the API content looks like, and I realize this is relatively small type, but this is a text format called JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a very clean and simple way to encode data into a text stream. It's actually used a lot on the web, especially behind the scenes of websites. And as you can see here, we have some general information about this particular term. We have the definitions. We have the source documents of where those definitions came from. We also have the way to cite this, and all of this data is licensed by IUPAC for free use, but as long as there's no commercial or derivative products. So this clearly makes this data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, which is one of the main focuses of the digital IUPAC, is how do we encourage chemists to be fair with their data, and how does IUPAC itself be fair with the data it provides? How did we've got to kind of where we are now. So all of the content, as I said, hasn't been updated, but that's the activity that we have going on now. So all of the divisions of IUPAC are currently looking at the recommendations that have come out from their particular division, and they are reviewing the terms and are going to provide updates either by inclusion of new terms that have been created since about the middle of 2006, 2007, but also updates to existing terms. And like I said, eventually when we get there, 5,000 terms, another 8,000 terms. Again, I don't quite know what the number is going to be, but it's still going to be a very significant update that we're going to do, because we now have over 300 recommendations as of a couple of months ago. And to do this activity, I have built another website, so separate than the regular main Gold Book website. And that is something I call the term review system. This just shows you one screenshot, quick screenshot of what this looks like, where I'm loading the content of the recommendations into a database. And then when the divisions have done their deliberations on what they want to do with particular terms, I will help them come to this website, and we will go through making sure that those terms that need updates or need typographical changes or slight revisions that do not change the definitions, that we will be able to put these in here, track the changes that are made, and then the big thing about this system is that it then allows the terms to be reviewed not only at the project level, which is the projects are where the individual divisions are doing their work, but also at the IUPAC divisional level, and then finally at the ICTNS, the top level, so that everybody gets to, all of the appropriate steps are done to approve the revisions to the terms, such that they can then go into the Gold Book. As you can imagine, this is a lot of work. I am actually not only building this site, but I'm also putting the content in. And so it's a lot of work to do it, but it's a very important work, because this is fundamentally important for humans, for chemists to be able to understand chemical concepts and know how a particular concept has been defined or redefined from the experts within IUPAC, but also, as we're going to talk about in a second here, thinking about how machines understand chemistry or can be trained to understand chemistry. So this activity to update the content of the Gold Book is something that I think the members of the IUICN can help with, and I would love to have them help. And I have a slide at the end here about how we can do that. But let me very quickly go on and talk about the phase 4. So the update that I've just mentioned is phase 3, but phase 4 is taking this corpus of defined concepts and turning it around and using it for machines. So what do we mean by that? So this is the semantic side of the web. Semantic in this sense, basically translate it to be, what is the meaning of things? People talk about it as knowledge representation. And if you think about it, obviously, those of us that have been in chemistry for our careers and have gone maybe to get a PhD, for instance, in particular, we've obviously studied chemistry a lot, and we, quote, understand chemistry. But we're going to start working with tools that can help us do our chemistry, and we want to make sure that those tools basically understand chemistry at a level that we can trust them to maybe make the right decisions about data. Now, we're not really close to that yet, but it's coming. And IUPAC and the Gold Book, and using the Gold Book content to create content for machines, is a very, very fundamentally important activity to make sure that when we get to that point, that the machines will be able to understand chemical concepts. So what do I mean by all of this? There's a lot of chemical information out there. There's a lot of websites that have chemical data. There's a lot of websites that talk about chemistry. Obviously, there's lots of research articles out there. If we take the content of the Gold Book and we use it in the creation of ontologies, and an ontology in this context is a computer file that basically allows you to define a concept and then nominally relate it to other concepts. It's a particular web language, and it's been around for 20 years, but it's a very robust infrastructure. And if we have all this great content once we've done our update, then we will have the current definitions of these, let's say 15,000 terms, and we can turn that around and use that to create either one ontology or potentially many ontologies for chemistry. We're currently collaborating with an effort in Germany called NFDI for Chem, and I apologize, I forgot to put the link in the slide. I will make sure that's added when I give the slides to you guys. But this is a major activity, and it also is really useful from the standpoint of doing an analysis of what areas of chemistry do we actually have covered with the definition of chemical concepts, but then also, well, what areas do we not have definitions? And so a gap analysis to be able to say, oh, we need IUPAC projects to be able to define concepts in this particular area or sub area to make sure we get rid of, or at least minimize, gaps in the knowledge representation. That's how people will talk about it. Now, this is already happening. IUPAC is working on this, but we're a little bit behind where some of the community already is. And so defined concepts in chemistry are already being used in ontologies in a number of different places. So for instance, these ontologies, and I won't go through each of these, but these are different ontologies that have been developed and are useful in the context of chemistry. And as you can see, a large number of terms have been, from the Gold Book, have been used in these ontologies to create entries to define concepts. I've also noted on here, there's over 70,000 references across the different international editions of Wikipedia on chemical concepts. And Wikipedia actually has a sister site called Wikidata, and Wikidata is where they also do this semantic representation of the knowledge in Wikipedia. So there's an incentive there for the IUPAC definition of concepts to be able to be turned into an ontology so that they can be added to Wikipedia through Wikidata, so that we actually give the correct meaning to different concepts that are listed on Wikipedia. So this is a very important topic area right now. Just to give you a quick example of what this looks like, because you probably don't have a perspective on this. This is a screenshot of a particular ontology in chemistry. It's the chemical methods ontology published by the Royal Society of Chemistry in the UK. And this is how, in a piece of software called Protégé, you define a specific context, concept in your ontology. You add an entry, and then you add annotations to describe this. And in this particular context, we're talking about limit of detection, which is typically a concept in analytical chemistry, where you give it a unique identifier right here, and then you give it a definition, which in this case is from the Gold Book. And then you can add any other information you like, but you can then also link this concept to other concepts. It's a very sophisticated system, and the development that's going on here is, in a general sense, to be able to represent information using another web standard called the Resource Description Framework, or RDF. And so this is where the Gold Book and its definitions is going to go, that we're going to basically be working on taking those concepts that have been defined by the volunteers in IUPAC and making them right now available to the community as best we can to be able to incorporate in ontologies that are already out there. But eventually it makes good sense for us to actually mint an ontology for chemistry, because obviously IUPAC is nominally responsible for the common language in chemistry, and this is exactly what we need to do from a computer sense. So to finish up, how can IYCN volunteers, members help in this activity? I have a few suggestions, and there are probably many, many more. So if you are at all interested in this activity, please do reach out to me, and we will try and get you kind of into the right place where your interest lies relative to this activity. As I mentioned, there are projects in each of the divisions in IUPAC that are working on the Gold Book update. And so I think it would be perfectly appropriate, and in fact, I encourage it, that members of IYCN try and become members of those projects. And if that is what people want to do, I'm happy to help facilitate that, because if there's one thing you can say about IUPAC, it's that our population of volunteers is on the more senior side. We need younger chemists to be part of IUPAC, because we need them to take over, from the more senior members of IUPAC, because we want the institutional knowledge to be maintained. So this is actually a generally critical issue anyway, outside of even the Gold Book. But anyway, if you're interested in actually helping to define concepts in chemistry, or in this case for the update, here are the discussions that happen in terms of reviewing the existing terms that have been published and how they're going to be updated for the Gold Book. Join a division appropriate for yourself in IUPAC. If you have any interest in data science, and that's a very broad statement, then you certainly can get involved. I've given 3 examples here. Writing Python code. If you happen to know Python code, or you're interested in learning how to code in Python, this would be great. I said that the current website is based off of the PHP programming language, but I have recently learned the Python programming language, and I believe that the next iteration of the Gold Book website needs to be a Python version for a number of different reasons, but primarily because Python, I think, is more accessible to scientists in terms of coding. And right now, the biggest problem with the Gold Book website is that I am the central point of failure. I basically know pretty much anything and everything about how the Gold Book is currently set up, and I need to disseminate that knowledge to a wider group of chemists, so that we can obviously make sure that this evolves as a community project moving forward. So there's a lot that needs to be done here. Like I said, adminning a database, for instance, would be another way to contribute, or chemical identifiers to create images of either chemical compounds, compound structures, or reactions. If you know anything about INCHI, the International Chemical Identifier, or its derivative, which is RINCHI, the reaction INCHI, you could potentially help out with the generation of images for the new website, because again, that's something that, while I can take images from the existing PAC recommendations to put on the Gold Book website, I would much rather make them dynamic images, meaning that they have a way almost automatically to link out to where those particular compounds are mentioned elsewhere on the web. And to do that, you have to have a chemical identifier behind the structure that's presented on the screen. If you're not really a coder, then we also absolutely have need for volunteers to help look at the current site and pick up where there are errors. As I said, we keep the website on GitHub, and that's a private website. It's a private repository. But if you're interested, I can give you access to it as a contributor. It would be limited access, but one of the things you can do then is put an issue onto GitHub, which is where I track all of the issues that need to be updated, and then I go in and update code, and I provide feedback to the GitHub repository about how that's been done, so that there's a bit of institutional knowledge as this kept there. And of course, if you really want to support the Gold Book, please use it. If you're in education, the Gold Book is a great source of concepts and examples. And one of the things that I would love to do, again, after the update has been done, is to make it more education friendly. And by that, I mean being able to not only give the formal definition, but to somehow kind of link it into other places where there are maybe more teaching-based examples of the concepts, so that we can really present the Gold Book as almost the ultimate resource to help understand chemistry. So I think there's a lot of ways that IYCN members can contribute here. As far as the question in the chat about how do you become a member of the IUPAC project groups, really, IUPAC is very open. As I said, we're all volunteers. So if an individual does want to become a member, or at least apply to be a member of one of the project teams, get in contact with me. Let me know which division of IUPAC would be most appropriate for you, and we'll work on getting you to be part of that project team. Again, it's a discussion, but you can sit on the sidelines, you can listen to the discussion, and then when you feel more comfortable, you can contribute. Because it does take a little bit of time to get up to speed, I understand. And so with that, I'll leave you with my contact information. Again, please reach out to me if you have any interest in getting involved. As I said, there's a lot of different ways we need help. This is a very forward-thinking activity. This is going to be very important for chemistry as a discipline moving forward. And we need volunteers to help out. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for this great insights and talk about the update to the IUPAC Gold Book and very important project. So I will now hand over to Torsten so that you can eventually guide any further questions that we might have, or even discuss a bit more about involvement, if I may, Torsten.
Okay, thanks, Jean, and thanks a lot to Stuart for this nice overview for the history and the current developments with the IUPAC Gold Book, and for showing the different options or opportunities that young chemists have to contribute to its development. And now you all have a chance to ask questions to Stuart. So you can, if you like, to raise your hand, or via a small group, you can also unmute yourselves indirectly, or also add questions to the chat. Otherwise, we will also, in any case, share the link afterwards of the recording with all of the IYCN members, and which you are. And we will also share the slides that we will receive from Stuart, so you will have his email address, and all the links are covered. There's one follow-up question in the chat.
Yes, I don't think you have to have a PhD to join an IUPAC group. We're, like I said, we're all volunteers, and in fact, again, we really are in need of younger chemists, because I'm 56 years old, and I'm probably one of the younger chemists in IUPAC at this moment. which isn't that young. Okay, so again, you can, as far as I know, you can join the project group and again, if there is any issue with that, I will get in the middle and help make that happen, because it's clear that that we need to get younger chemists in IUPAC. I can't say it enough. You know, one of the big concerns is that we won't be able to keep the institutional memory in the divisions about, you know, how the IUPAC the recommendations have been developed. And so if we have some younger chemists involved, that will obviously help that, because we need to get them involved in the development of either new terms or the updates to existing terms. Everybody's exhausted from the General Assembly, I guess.
So, thank you for the interesting talk, Professor Chalk. I was just looking at the IUPAC website for an overview of the different projects groups, and I didn't immediately find it. So I was wondering how many project groups are there?
Okay, let me see if I can find that for you right now. Let me get out of here and let me get into my web browser. So IUPAC has, let me see if I can find that exactly. IUPAC has 8 divisions, and actually let me go and, oh, I hate it when it comes up. Hold on a second, because I'm sharing my screen, the controls have got in the way again. Okay, here we go. So this is the projects page on IUPAC's website. You can basically type in Gold Book, for instance, or in here, and that should get you to see what different Gold Book based projects there are right now. So for instance, I'm trying to see, maybe it would be better to do updates. Might more easily come up with this. There is a, and these are not sorted by, actually, maybe they are sorted now. Here we go. So here we go. Gold Book update of terms for chemistry and the environment. Let's see. I'm not seeing all the other ones. They were minted further back, I think. Anyway, here we go. Gold Book update of terms of organic and biomolecular chemistry. So one of the things I'll do in addition is I'll try and put in a slide that has links to each of those projects so that you have that. But there is basically one project per IUPAC division. And again, there are 8 divisions. And they are all in parallel working on doing the updates for their divisional updates for the Gold Book.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No other questions? I mean, I was that comprehensive. I know everybody's tired and you're probably in a time zone where it's late at night or very early in the morning, so I understand.
So if you have a question, really take the opportunity now to ask it. You have Stuart now here in person. And even if you're new to the field or new to IUPAC and IYCN, don't be afraid. You can ask the question and write it in the chat. Or if there's anything that you have as a question afterwards, you can follow up with us or with Stuart directly when he shared his slides.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Send me an email about anything to do with IUPAC, in fact. And if I can't answer the question, I will happily forward it to someone that I think can. It's a quiet group today. This is very similar to how my students are when my students are on the class. So to answer the follow-up question, just contact me directly and I will help you get in touch with the project in the division that you're interested in. there's not an online form, although maybe there should be. That might be a good idea. And I feed that idea back to those in IUPAC that can make that happen. So
maybe one question from my side. So what is there's someone who unmuted. Umuru, do you have a question?
Yes, my name is Umuru Benjamin Oguche. My question is, can someone belong to more than one of the groups in the IUPAC project team?
Yes, because we're all volunteers. It's basically, you know, you decide how you want to volunteer. And one of the things that I can show you is, if I go really quickly to the who we are, this is the member directory. And if you put my name in, you will find my contact information here, but you will also see, hopefully when it comes up, all of the activities that I'm currently involved in. And there's quite a long list. So you can see that I'm engaged in many different things. In fact, each of the individual divisions having a project means I'm on each one of those projects, because obviously I need to be communicating with them about their activities and how to help them make sure getting it into the TRS system that I showed can be done.
Well, hello, sir.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
What I want to ask again is, when we are grouped, I haven't volunteered now that I will be a member of the group. When we are grouped, how do we meet ourselves to work to discuss on how the work will go on?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that. Is it how do you collaborate with?
How do we collaborate to get it done?
Okay, so the project groups have I think they're using GoToMeeting to have calls of their membership on a regular basis. And so basically, if you wanted to join an individual division, a project within an individual division, you would just be put on the email list for when those meetings are, and obviously you could get on to those meetings just like this. And obviously at the first one, you'd probably introduce yourself, but then you basically will be on the meeting, and they will be going through their process and discussing, each of the terms that they need to go through. And then you can just listen in and try and get a sense of how it works. And once you become maybe a bit familiar with that, if you have if you have a particular comment relative to an individual defined term, or the way things, or the way maybe a structure is drawn, or a chemical reaction is represented, or whatever it is, you can have your own input on that.
Okay. I'm personally interested. I'm from Nigeria, and I work at I'm in Nigeria, and I work at the university in the academic environment. I'm interested.
Good. We'd love to have you.
Yes. Do I make any further mail, or you take my name down?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do I make mail?
Do you make
furtherly to you, or further other mails to you, or you take my name down and can give you my email, so that
the best thing is
where I'm suitable for.
Yeah, the best thing is send me an email. Here's my email address right here. Send me an email, and then we can work out how to get you in touch with the project that you're interested in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My question was also related to this one, to how the typical workload would be, or the typical time that a volunteer should plan to invest, like per month or per week, working on the project.
So it's really up to the volunteer. Typically at this point, I think individual projects that are specifically focused on the update of the Gold Book are probably meeting at maybe most frequently every month, maybe every couple of months. And so I would say it's a minimal investment. Obviously, it's the amount of time for the meeting, and then potentially, some time maybe to review some very specific terms that are going to be discussed at the next meeting or something like that. It really depends how the chair of the project decides to run the project and how they ask the members of the project group to go about doing the review. Some of them do it some do it one way, some do it another. I would say for membership of one particular project group, I would say it would be no more than about at maximum maybe 4 hours per month to get involved. And even that might be, depending upon exactly how the activities are set up, that might be more than what you would have to do. But again, if you're just getting into this, I would absolutely, attend the meetings, decide, is this one, the right division for me to be in? And two, do I think I can contribute? And then you work out how many hours you can contribute. Because we are a volunteer organization, we cannot demand the members of our projects to do things as quickly as maybe we would like to get them done. But it's just the way the union is set up.
Thanks, Stuart.
Fatima says, what kind of experience should a volunteer have? What level of coding, computer language should there be? As far as the just general experience, I think it would be good if you either had your undergraduate degree and were maybe in industry, and had therefore a perspective of how you use your chemistry in industry. So not just the basic academic understanding, but practical real world application, or having already had a master's degree, or obviously being in a PhD program working towards a PhD. Those are the kinds of levels that I think you would need to have at minimum, because you need to be able to obviously understand the chemistry that's being discussed and in a sense feel like you can contribute. Hopefully that helps. Oh, as far as computer language is concerned, if you know anything about Python, or if you know anything about how to administrate databases, especially a MySQL database, if you know anything about data science in a general sense, and I realize these are not normal topic areas that chemists know, but if you have anything that you know about those kinds of things, that would be very advantageous, because that's the kind of even low-level knowledge of that stuff and understanding of that stuff, that would be really useful to me, because I can train you. I can take you from where you are and get you up to maybe a higher level in an area that you would like to get into. Yeah, thank you for that endorsement, Fatima. I agree.
I have also a question, Stuart, if I may. So you already talked about the involvement in the different projects. So I think that people can also work at interface, right? If they believe that they can commit with more time, or they think that they have the enough experience, or they want to contribute in any way, even if they don't have experience to different projects, they are able to, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, if you wanted to be a member of two different divisions, because you were an interface scientist, then absolutely you could do that. It's up to you how much time you can volunteer, and in the end, if you are on the interface, it's really probably good to get into both projects just to find out what kinds of things are they working on, and then you can see what maybe fits your interest the best, because obviously you're not likely to be motivated if you're not that interested in what they're working on. So
yeah, thank you. Are there any further questions? seems no. So maybe we close and we thank you, of course, very much, Stuart, for your kindness in being available on a Sunday for giving this very important talk about the updates and very important insights. So we'll for sure share, as you agreed, the recording, and also if you can also provide us the slides or a PDF of what you present, so that it will be helpful as well for those that eventually were planning to join, but for some reason they couldn't join the call.
Yep.
We thank you very much once more, and again we'll be very happy to help on our side at IYCN, of course, to this important project for IUPAC and for the community for sure.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, so have a nice evening. Torsten, I don't know if you want also to say something, or otherwise we close the meeting.
We can definitely close the meeting, and also thanks a lot from my side to Stuart and to all the interested IUPAC members who joined the webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.